Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure in introducing to you all Charlotte Caden. Is from Los Angeles, California, and she has taken a lot of trouble. It is a lazy Sunday afternoon there, and she has taken a time off to address all of us. So let me express her my great thank you on behalf of Amity to her. And she has worked with a variety of technology roles during her 10 years with the Walt Disney Company. She received a Bachelor's of Science in Information Systems and Operations Management from the University of Florida and her MBA with specializations in technology leadership and global management from UCLA's Anderson School of Business. Charlotte lives in Los Angeles and enjoys singing and volunteering. And she's going to talk to you on a topic with making magic in my dream technology career at Disney. Okay, over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that very kind introduction. So hello, everyone. Good morning. I am very excited to be speaking with you. I am going to have a pretty unstructured chat today. I'll be walking you through sort of my career and how I sort of carved my own path, if you will, to get into different positions that I was really hoping to achieve during my career at Disney. Base of the premise is that I have been with the Walt Disney Company for 10 years now, almost exactly 10 years, and I love it. This was a career that I didn't even really think would be an option for me growing up. I grew up in Florida. So in Florida, we have Walt Disney World. It's a really big theme park or a big resort. We've got 4 theme parks. We have, I think, 29 or now 31 resort hotels. We have mini golf, whole lot of offerings in Orlando. And so since I grew up not far from Orlando, I was able to go there as a guest, as a tourist, and experience all these wonderful magical things. And so I always loved it. But when I got to my bachelor's program at the University of Florida, and I decided to move into the business school and into technology, it wasn't the first thing that came to mind. I was interviewing with Deloitte for consulting. I was looking at our big tech companies and even the accounting firms. We had a lot of IT auditing, recruitment activities. But all of a sudden, one day, there was a Disney IT recruiting field trip, and it was just a light bulb moment for me. I said, this is where I need to be. As a lifelong fan of Disney, of the parks, of the movies, you name it, I loved it. And so I went to this recruiting field trip, and I brought my resume and I kind of cornered the person who organized the event. And I said, hi, I'm really interested. Talk to me. You know, this is my background and my education, my experience. Where do you think I would be a good fit within Disney, and how can we make this happen? And so she looked at my experiences. I had been really involved in my undergraduate program. I was involved in the Association of Information Technology Professionals. I was involved in multiple volunteer organizations. And one thing that had always struck me in those different leadership roles was the way that documentation impacted our success. So if you think about, you probably have similar organizations, student-run organizations. As different students come into leadership, there's different lessons that are learned, and then sometimes those lessons are not passed along to their replacements. So I had really championed documentation in a lot of my organizations to make sure that as we learned things and improved our processes, that the next round of students who would follow in our footsteps would not have to repeat those mistakes. They could continue to build and build and just do better and better. And so that was a big part of what was on my resume at the time, because I didn't have a lot of professional experience. And so this recruiter that I was talking with at Disney said, I think you might be a good fit in a business analyst role. So business analysis, kind of an interesting term, but business analysts typically do things like documentation of requirements. They elicit requirements gathering sessions. They facilitate these sessions, and it's it's an interesting nuanced role because you have to be able to hear what the end consumer is saying that they want, but what they say they want is not always exactly what they actually want. You have to kind of distill it to what is the true problem and use your own expertise to think about maybe multiple ways of solving that problem. And so this business analyst role was really fascinating to me. So I had not had a lot of exposure to this business analyst role prior to my internship. And I had a great mentor figure who was able to show me the ropes, if you will. And she gave me different resources and tools to both learn about it on my own and do some research and dig in, and also to sort of try it on for size in my internship. So I was doing a lot of shadowing of people in various roles. And one of the first things I did was I was asked to document the current state processes for an offering called Disney's Magical Express. If you were to fly to Walt Disney World in Orlando, and if you were staying in one of our hotels, our resorts, you could opt to take a bus, a fancy bus, from the Orlando airport to your Disney hotel for free. And we will mail you luggage tags. So if you check a bag before you get on your flight, it has this nice little Mickey symbol. It's a yellow tag. And that way, when your luggage arrives at the Orlando airport, they know it's going to Disney. It immediately gets sort of separated from all the other luggage, and it goes on the bus with you, and it will just show up at your resort room, whether you bring it there or not. So you can opt in as a guest. This is a free service, and it's really special. And so when I had started my internship, it was the 5-year anniversary of Disney's Magical Express. And the team said, you know, we built this 5 years ago. We trained the cast members. We call our employees cast members. We trained these cast members and even to some extent our guests to understand this offering in a certain way. And we wonder if this is how people are still using it today. So 5 years later, I went from the beginning of the process to the end of the process. So everything from when you make your reservation, you get an email that says, hey, would you like to do Disney's Magical Express? Your data gets entered into different systems. It flows through if all goes well. And then when you show up at the airport, the way that your luggage gets sorted and ultimately ends up at your hotel room. So there were stakeholders that I spoke with in so many different teams, from a technology side, from an operations side. Even at the airport, there are people who stand in a certain area of the airport, because if you're riding Disney's Magical Express, we have our own section where all of those buses go. And we call them luxury motor coaches. So you get on, there's wonderful air conditioning, comfortable seats. There's a video that plays that's welcoming you to Disney. So Disney is really, and this is all my own phrasing of these things, this is Disney already taking control of your vacation experience from the moment you land at the airport. So if you were to take a taxi from the airport to Disney, you might not have a great experience. But if you take this bus, Disney can kind of help do quality control and help ensure that you arrive happy and comfortable and pleased. So a really interesting offering, very popular with our guests. We also offered this to guests who came in from our cruise lines. Disney's got cruise ships, and there were times when people would take these cruise ships from Orlando. So you would fly into Orlando and you'd stay in a Disney hotel, but you were ultimately going to get on a cruise ship instead of going into a hotel. I don't have PowerPoint slides. I will hopefully be showing a little bit of a screen share from some websites to show off a little bit of the products that I've worked on, but no presentation today. That was a question that came through. So this Disney's Magical Express was a really exciting project for me to sort of get my feet wet in the business analysis role. Learned a lot, met a lot of interesting people, and ultimately when my internship ended, we were coming out of a recession here in the US, and they didn't have a permanent home for me. So I said, I really want to stay with Disney. I understand that I can't convert this internship directly into a full-time role. So I went online to our careers website and I found another internship over in California, the other side of the country, for the Disney stores. So these are the stores in malls across America and around the world. And at the time, the Disney stores were really embracing technology and making the stores interactive. So our theme parks in the United States are in Florida and California. But if you're somewhere like Massachusetts or New York, you're pretty far from the Disney parks. And so there are people who never get to go. So how do you bring that magic of Disney out to those people, no matter where they are? And so these Disney stores were already in lots of malls. And I was part of a project team that was putting in all these technology pieces. We had RFID tags, we had interactive magic mirrors, we actually had giant screens in the store that would play video clips. And so when we had a new movie release, we had lots of coordinated events in the store to promote the new movie and ultimately encourage people to buy merchandise from the new movies. So as an example, the magic mirror looked just like a mirror, and it was located right next to all these princess dresses. But next to the dresses, you have accessories. You have a crown, you have a wand, you have shoes. If you were to pick up a wand, it might be a Princess Ariel wand or a Princess Belle wand. And if you were to wave this wand with the RFID tag in front of the mirror, it would know which princess you had chosen, and that princess would appear magically and start kind of reacting to what you had done. And so this was a real crowd pleaser, and we really got to be involved with that from kind of the foundational levels. Some of what I did was pay attention to the actual installation of these technology components. We worked with, I will come back to that question. We worked with third-party vendors. We worked with internal folks. Sometimes you can create your documentation and say, yes, this is exactly what we want you to do, but you send over the pieces and you don't know exactly what was done. So some of what I did was I visited different locations and I reviewed the setup of the technology to make sure that we got all the data we needed. So ultimately, one thing that I had started was to start reporting on our content usage. So this was around the time that Tangled released in theaters. So if we had a Tangled event, did we actually sell more Tangled merchandise? Those types of questions. And it was really exciting. From there, I actually moved back to Orlando and I started a temporary role as a business analyst, this time on a content management team. So for my Disney store role, I worked with a content management system. This was where we got all our video clips and all these little things that we triggered. In this new role that I had started, I got to combine both of my prior experiences. I got to be a business analyst in name, and I got to work on a content management system because I was now familiar with what those entailed. And so I was able to really sell myself to this team and say, you need me. I am exactly the right candidate for this because I happen to have these two experiences that make me a really good fit. So I started with this team, and this was right before a really big project was about to wrap up in Orlando. If you were to Google or search on My Magic Plus, you would see this huge technology architecture project that we did at Walt Disney World. So as I mentioned, Walt Disney World is large. The 4 theme parks, people plan for years and years and they save up money to go over Christmas 1 year to Walt Disney World. And you really want to make the most of it. Can you say that again?
हाँ चल तो रहा है. Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Let me think on this. So My Magic Plus was launching at Walt Disney World, and we had been hearing feedback from guests that planning these vacations was very stressful for them. There was all this pressure to be able to do everything. So if you get one chance to go, you don't want to miss out on this really great ride that you had your heart set on riding, or this show, or these fireworks. And so Disney said, how can we help guests to prepare for these vacations and guarantee that they get to do all the things they want to do? So My Magic Plus really took all of these experiences and brought them online for online reservations and what we call pre-arrival reservations. So it used to be you would show up at the Magic Kingdom and you would say, man, I want to go on Space Mountain. And you'd walk over and you'd go on Space Mountain. But if the line was too long because people got there earlier in the day and they were standing in line the whole time, you may not get your chance. And so we shifted a lot of the decisions out further back from the actual vacation to be before you arrived. So if you were really concerned because you have an allergy and you don't know if you can dine at a certain restaurant, you could share those concerns in advance and Disney can accommodate them. So this took a lot of content entry and content auditing. We had all sorts of schedules, all sorts of images and metadata that had to be loaded into our content management system because it was ultimately going to be guest facing on our websites and on our mobile applications. And so I was on this team right at the turning point for all of this. We went from having all of this data be internal, where you still want it to be important. If cast members are going to be answering questions by looking up a schedule on this internal application, you want it to be correct. But if it's not, the consequences are not necessarily as bad. But once it's guest facing, there's a lot of pressure to get things right. And so lots of checking, lots of data cleanup, looking for duplicate entries in all of our databases, things like that. And so I loved this job. I thought it was the most exciting time to be part of this project. I almost forgot. So we had all of that data set up, but ultimately it tied into your physical experience in the park. So this connected via a wristband called a Magic Band. This is an RFID enabled band, and this is tied to your selections that you had signed up for in advance. So if you knew that you were going to the park with a one-day ticket and you were staying in a hotel and you were dining at a certain restaurant, all of that is stored in your online profile. And you could use this wristband as your park entry ticket, your room key for your hotel room. You can pay with this wristband by linking a credit card. All sorts of experiences were tied to this wristband, which meant a ton of infrastructure investment across our physical properties. So huge changes, really impactful changes. And that was, I think, a real turning point for us to shift from sort of a waterfall IT methodology in the sense that you come up with all your requirements, you build the product, and then you deploy it all in one big bang, shifting to more of an agile approach. So it's incremental. So instead of saying, we want the guests to be able to do 100 things with this Magic Band and they're all going to be ready on day one, you start with a subset of those, and then you deploy it, you see how it's received, and maybe you make adjustments and you iterate as you go. I'm sure you're familiar with this concept, but I can loop back to it in a little bit because it's going to be relevant again. And so this project was really impactful from a guest perspective in terms of their experience going to the park, as well as from a employee perspective. As a cast member myself, the way that I did my work was changing. And so I felt so fortunate to be a part of the company and the team that I was on at this particular time. From there, personal circumstances brought me back to California, where I continued to work on this same team, but the project that I mentioned with the magic bands was really only in Orlando. And so my prospects to grow on this team were not as strong. I could still do a lot of the same work, but it's not quite the same as being there in person. And so I went looking for my next opportunity, and I was looking for something that was really based in California. And so I ended up starting as a senior analyst with our corporate division. So this was 3 years from the start of my first internship. I went internship, project hire to permanent hire to boom, senior analyst. And so my title there was Senior Business Process Analyst. And it was a big adjustment from what I had been doing. This was part of our financial systems group, and it was basically an enterprise role. So I was part of our corporate division, but what we worked on was used by finance and accounting employees all throughout the company, from our Disney studios to our Disney parks to our television, including international. I partnered with folks in India. I partnered with folks in London, in Latin America. It was incredible to be on these calls and hearing about how the regulation of, for example, tax laws and other financially impactful regulations, all of those things influence the way that Disney records their numbers. So we, in some ways, were at the mercy of what is happening elsewhere. But in other ways, we had this really impressive team of folks who were paying attention to all of these changes happening in regulations worldwide. And how can we make it so that our processes are better insured against these changes or better prepared to handle these changes, and just generally automating really repetitive processes. A lot of what I was exposed to in finance and accounting was very cyclical and often repeated. The types of reports that were run and the way that they had to, we called it massage those reports. So you have a set of data and you need it to output a certain set of data, and maybe these things aren't a direct link. Maybe you need to multiply a number or add these 3 numbers, all sorts of things. And every time you run this report, you have to do the same thing. And so this is an example. So this team that I was on and this role that I was in as a senior analyst, I actually initially helped with our forecasting group. All of our, we call it AOP, annual operating plan. At the beginning of the fiscal year, the company will set their expectations of this is how much we expect to pay people, or this is the project that we're doing, how much we expect it to cost, all sorts of things like that. And I was involved on that side of our numbers. And then I said, this isn't the right fit for me. I was only working with a very small team, our FP&A team, that's financial planning and analysis. And I really missed partnering with all types of people like I did in my parks role. So within my team, I talked to my leadership and I said, you know, I would love to get exposure to some other parts of our team, see what they do, and see if I might be a better fit there. And almost instantly an opportunity came up, and I was able to help automate a process that had been extremely repetitive and manual and time consuming for a long time. And so they said, oh, fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and the technical skill set to be able to automate it, let's bring her in. And so I was able to move within that team a couple of times. Ultimately, my last role on that team was focused on our master data. So when you are recording your financial information, it's got to kind of correlate to specific parts of the company or specific accounts. And that all has to be set up. It's kind of like the skeleton, the underlying structure of your financial reporting. And so I was really, in my 2 prior roles within that team, I had seen the impact of the master data, and I kept thinking that it could be done in a better fashion. And so I sort of moved into that team and helped implement improvements there. I loved partnering with all of the partners that I got to work with. There was nothing quite like chatting with my APAC partners. And then in business school, I actually got to go to Australia as part of my research, and I got to meet up with some of my APAC partners in Australia. And they didn't get a lot of visitors from the US, so at least not from our working team. So I had really incredible opportunities to learn about the broader Disney company, a very different perspective from what I got working in Orlando or for the Disney stores. Even though the Disney stores were global, it was a very different slice of technology for the company. So ultimately, while I was on this enterprise financial systems team, I decided to go back to school and get my MBA. I did a part-time MBA program at UCLA Anderson. So this is in my broader city, not exactly down the street, but definitely close enough that I could drive there multiple times per week without trouble. And this program is designed to be completed within 3 years by taking classes either in the weeknights or on weekends. And I really had my heart set on attending this particular school, very well regarded, huge network within California and within the business world, I think in the US and to some extent even worldwide. And I decided that this program was the right choice for me because I really loved working for Disney and I had good momentum and I didn't want to pass it up. So I applied, I got accepted, and I was able to take these classes and use what I was learning right away because I didn't have a break between what I was learning and the work that I was doing. The next day, if I had a class on Tuesday night, Wednesday during the day at work, someone might use a term that I had just learned, and instantly I felt like I was doing my job even more effectively and with greater mastery than I had before. But during my MBA program, I realized that there were other career opportunities that I didn't even learn about either in undergrad or in the years since. And one of those was product management. I had heard the term maybe a couple of times, but didn't know a lot about it. And ultimately, I had the opportunity to take a course in product management and to hear from a lot of guest speakers. And this course was a perfect way for me to better understand product management and to try it out. It was a very experiential course. So there were lectures, but they were not the majority of our class time. A lot of it was working in teams and performing the functions that we were learning about. And it was really transformative for me to be able to learn about this role and to sort of put on my product management hat and see how I did, and I did pretty well. And then to have guest speakers who were performing this function at major companies come and speak to us was also very influential. So when I finished my MBA program, which I loved and I can certainly talk more about, I had decided to get concentrations in technology management, technology leadership, and global management. These are both areas I was really passionate about. And I said, regardless of whether I stay in a true technology role or not, I think that technology is really foundational to a lot of what companies are doing these days, whether it's your core competency or whether it is just a necessary evil for you to be able to do what you do. I felt technology is not going anywhere anytime soon, and whatever I can do to really stay ahead of the game would be to my benefit. And so I studied technology leadership and global management. I had always loved the global nature of my my couple of experiences at Disney that gave me that global exposure. And I love Disney and wanted to keep working for Disney. And so I decided anything that would make me even stronger as a Disney employee would be to my benefit as well. And so On the flip side, if I were to leave Disney, I think both of these specializations would serve me well. These strengths, some of them are building on prior strengths that I had. I think that I'm a fairly technical person, which is funny because my undergrad didn't set me up for being a developer or a programmer. I learned a few programming languages. I learned the basics, but ultimately I was able to sort of take on the lingo, learn the language, be able to speak to it intelligently. So if I'm on a team and I'm talking to a developer, that developer can tell me exactly what he or she is doing, and I can understand it. I may not be able to do all of it, but it helps me better represent the technical side of our team to our non-technical partners and vice versa. Being able to sort of translate technical concepts and non-technical concepts to those correct audiences, I think is really one way that I have made my own path in my career and been sort of distinguished among my peers. So I studied both of these at Anderson, and I took this product management course, and I decided that I was very interested in working in this capacity. So ultimately, there were some openings at Disney in product management, and between my schooling, which I think sort of opened the door, and my network, all the people that I've been working with for the prior, at that point, 8 or 9 years, every one of them sort of had a link that connected me to this particular role. And so I applied for this job. I was recommended by a contact of mine, and that sort of got me the interview. And from there, my combined experience made me a really strong candidate. And so I was hired into my current role, which is a product management role. I am a product manager specifically within our technology and digital organization for the parks and resorts. So I'm not doing as much, if anything, with the movie studios or the TV shows or anything of that nature. But I am very specifically tied to our apps for Disney World and Disneyland, and our websites also for Disney World and Disneyland. And I've also recently started doing some more work with our Hong Kong resort app and website and partners. So I see a question that I will speak to again in a little bit about Hong Kong. But ultimately, I am very excited to be working on technology offerings that are part of our guest experience for the parks. So when you go to the theme parks, a lot of our attractions use technology. I'm not touching that technology, but you could be interested in how long you have to wait to ride a ride. For example, we have a few rides. We have one called Space Mountain. It's a roller coaster, and it's in the dark, and there's stars, and you look like you're flying through space, and it's very popular, lots of fun. So you might not want to wait in a line if it's more than an hour, or if it's more than 2 hours. And previously, you would have to walk over to Space Mountain and look at it to see how long the wait was. And now, using our apps, we are reporting in real time that wait time data to our guests so that they can make informed decisions about their day. They can decide, yes, I will ride Space Mountain right now because this amount of time looks really acceptable to me. Maybe I just ate. Maybe a 30-minute wait is exactly what I want. Or they could say, you know, I'm not going to do this right now. I'll come back later. We also are doing sort of what I mentioned earlier, where you can pre-select your offerings. So we call this Fast Pass. In addition to waiting in what we call the standby line, there is sort of an accelerated line, if you will, where it's almost like when you put your name in at a restaurant. You don't have to stand in a physical line and let somebody bring you through. Someone will kind of let you know when it's your turn. And so the same way you make a reservation at a restaurant and they know that at 7:30 they'll full, but at 8:30 they'll have openings. The Fast Pass system works sort of similar. So we will have a certain number of slots available for you to show up at 7:30 for Space Mountain, and a certain number of slots available for other times. And so you don't have to pre-select, but if you don't want to wait physically in line for as long, you can wait sort of virtually by getting a fast pass and coming back later. And in a way, you're in a virtual line of sorts. So FastPass has been around, I think something like over 20 years right now. So we have improved upon the FastPass system. We've made it more accurate. We've made it easier to use. We've made it digital. It used to be that you would walk over to a machine and you'd pull out a ticket and that had your time. Now you can do it all from the app. And it's pretty popular with guests. If you think about, would you rather wait in a line for an hour, or would you rather get a ticket or get a fast pass and come back in 45 minutes and only wait in line for 10? It's a pretty strong use case there. So I work on FastPass, and I also work on a product called Virtual Queue, which we rolled out just about a year ago, maybe a little over. So we opened Star Wars Land in Disneyland and in Disney World. This was a whole new land, and we know how popular Star Wars is. And so there were a lot of people who said, how can we prepare for this level of demand, knowing that the land is only so big and not everyone is going to be able to be in it at the same time and have a good time. So we made a virtual queue system, which was different from FastPass in that it didn't have set time slots. So it's very similar to if we were to go back to the restaurant reservation example. If the restaurant said, you know, we might have room for you later, but we might not, check back in a couple hours and we'll let you know, closer to virtual queue. Virtual queue is very interactive. The guest signs up in the mobile app, and if you have push notifications enabled, we will send you a push notification when it's your turn. We'll tell you where to go. You can see your progress. We have all sorts of fun animations in the app as part of the virtual queue experience. So we have the little bit of Disney magic, if you will. And even that product has evolved a great deal in the last year. And so everything I'm doing is currently using Agile methodology. We have daily scrums, we have very iterative processes, and our teams are really empowered. And so in my product management role, I see myself as a representative of our end consumers. I want to know their experience. I see myself also as a good representative of the technical team to be able to say, yes, this is something that we could achieve in a month, or no, this is really something that's going to be highly complicated, high level of effort, and we know that the team already has work lined up for the next month, so we can't promise that today. I have really enjoyed being in this product management role because I get to use my technical skills, those translations that I was talking about for technical audiences or non-technical audiences, and I get to use a lot of my business school education. I am partnering with marketing very closely. I'm partnering with our finance team. I am using a lot of that business acumen that I've gained and building on it to really perform my role fully. And so I have found this very rewarding to be able to influence this offering and to see my influence manifest in the product in pretty short turnarounds. That's one of the nice things about Agile. I don't have to wait a year for this project to wrap up and to see, or more, sometimes multiple years, to see exactly how it's received and to be able to show my family and say, hey, I worked on this. So that is sort of my own take on product management. I do know with great certainty that product management, as I perform it at Disney, is a little different from team to team. at Disney, from segment to segment. So from parks to our Disney Plus group, our streaming group, and any other segment that has product managers. Everybody does it a little differently. And then also between Disney and other companies. So I can certainly speak to my experience doing this role, but I also would stress that my experience is not necessarily what everyone would experience. So I guess to sort of wrap up my initial portion, because I think I'm getting close to Q&A time, I would say that my career has been really gratifying. I've gotten to work on a wide variety of technology teams and projects, some more technical, some less technical, but always under an umbrella organization that is focused on using technology to achieve business goals. And I have found this to be a great home for me, home regardless of where I was moving. And I am really grateful for the opportunities I've received. I think someone asked me recently, and I will just start here, if you don't have a product management background or even a technical background, how might you make the case to move into product management? And I said, one of the things that we did in my product management class was sort of put on that hat of the product manager and do that function and just sort of grow that skill set and that muscle. So if you were to look at WhatsApp, if you use this every day, you know the features really well. But if you were to think about it from a product manager's perspective for WhatsApp, what are the areas of opportunity to make this product better, to make the user experience improved? And are there issues? Maybe you notice something that's not working as expected and you report it, and maybe they have a list of 50 things that someone has reported at one point or another. How do you rank those items and address them in order of priority, in order of kind of impact and urgency? So that is one way to sort of think about the role of a product manager in terms of setting the prioritization for what work is going to be completed for a particular product, whether it's new features and new functionality, or whether it's cleaning up stuff that's already out there. Sometimes you can only do one thing at a time. And so as a product manager, in my experience, you are the one who is asked to make the judgment call of what to work on as the earlier priority as opposed to later. And so sometimes you are correct. Sometimes you later find out that it really would have been better to work on something else. But in some ways, there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's sort of an art over a science. And so I have found this role to be really great for sort of exercising that left brain and right brain. You get to be creative, you get to problem solve, you get to partner with many people and use your communication skills to get everybody aligned with your vision and execute on it. And with that, I think I'm pretty close to Q&A time. So if that's correct, I'll start with some of the ones that have been sent over using the Q&A function. Is the Disney in Hong Kong the same as in US? So I haven't been to the Hong Kong park, but as I said, I've recently been supporting the Hong Kong park. And so I have definitely some familiarity, and I have been to our Tokyo park in Japan. And so I can tell you that within the US, there's certain traditional experiences that are offered. And some of those translate to our international parks and some of those don't. A lot of them are pretty similar. So if I mention Space Mountain, there is likely a Space Mountain or a very similar attraction in Hong Kong. We do try to use these existing parks. The first one was Disneyland, as sort of a best practice framework to say, this is really great that people show up and they are on Main Street USA, we call it here. And so it has a certain look and feel. And if you walk to the right, you're in Tomorrowland. It's very futuristic. That's where Space Mountain is. It doesn't feel like anything that you would see if you were walking down a normal town in the US. And then on a further side of the park, you'll hit Adventureland and Frontierland. And so we have all these different themed areas. And so in Hong Kong, similar structure where you have the castle sort of in the middle, and you have themed lands. The different lands might be different, and some of the rides are different. And obviously some characters are well known worldwide, and some are better known in some areas rather than others. So the Hong Kong Disney parks are, it's definitely a smaller footprint. So like I mentioned, Walt Disney World has 4 theme parks. I think in Hong Kong we have 1, maybe 2, and definitely not as many hotels. So Hong Kong is more similar to Disneyland, which is in California. That's the one that I've been supporting for the last couple of years more closely. So definitely similarities for sure. Hong Kong, Disney did reopen from COVID, but then they had to close down again. And so we're watching that closely. And from my technology support perspective, we're working to make sure that the team can update the website and have it reflect the correct updates at the correct time. Really, it's very sensitive stuff. So it's very susceptible, I would say, to information leaking early. And so it's been a really interesting experience to be working on the Hong Kong parks side. So other questions? Different strategies that we use to come up with a new product or technology. I cannot speak to this. Disney is very strict about what we share that is internal information. I would recommend there are a lot of interviews that have been approved by Disney and provided by Disney executives, and they make for fascinating articles. So the My Magic Plus project that I talked about, really in-depth reports that have gone out about how that came to be. But I can't talk about what strategies we use today. But I will tell you that our strategy team is very forward-thinking, and they are usually 10 steps ahead of what's currently happening at a minimum. So if you think about where you think the world is going and how you might prepare today to meet the needs of a future world, I would say broadly that's what Disney is doing. If a new product is very innovative, but the customer impressions are poor. So in my personal experience, most of my products have been a mix of paid products and non-paid products. So FastPass is a free offering, and if guests don't like it, it doesn't have a monetary impact, but maybe the guest is unhappy and they don't want to come back to the parks at all, and that's obviously a big impact. We definitely are very tuned in to our customer impressions. On the park side, we have lots of surveys that go out. We have cast members in the park that as you're leaving, they'll say, hi, can you answer a couple questions? And it'll be different questions every time. And so we try to really have our finger on the pulse of how our guests are feeling about everything. Our guests are also very, very passionate. So they're all over social media and they make their opinions very well known. My virtual queue product, there were entire Twitter accounts that were created just to talk about virtual queue and to sort of mock up what they think virtual queue should be. So obviously we're going to do what we think is best, but it's very fascinating that our guests are not quiet or secretive about their feelings. So we hear people loud and clear, and it's really informative to see what people take issue with and what they like. I see a question, why doesn't Disney set up in India? For millions of us, traveling to the US is too expensive a dream. I hear you. I know that our strategy team has definitely been looking all across the world. I don't know exactly whether India is on the horizon in the future. Like I said, they're typically looking so many steps in advance that we wouldn't see the results of their analysis for years. So for all I know, maybe it's already on the radar and it's being worked on, but it's in super early stages. Otherwise, I definitely don't have the answer. I think for all we know, there was some reason that it's been rolled out, and I'm sure they're reevaluating all the time. India is a huge market, lots of people, like you said, it's very well known. Not everyone can travel to an existing Disney Parks location. So it's very much relevant to our strategy teams, but where they're deciding, you know, that's beyond my pay grade for sure. But Disney is definitely moving in interesting spaces, like our recent television and streaming acquisitions and plans, especially with the Fox merger. I think Star might be in India, and we definitely have a presence in India, but the parks are not there at this time, as you know. So that's the best I've got to answer that question. I saw an earlier question about, which is correct, all of my experience was largely pre-COVID, and advice to get internships and experiences in this during COVID and post-COVID world. I have to tell you that I have witnessed from very close friends the difficulty in the US to get hired if you don't have citizenship or a visa. And I know that that is very fraught right now. So I am far from an expert, but I can tell you that realistically, it's a very uphill battle. That said, I know being a student has different offerings, although you're all already students. A lot of my peers that I know here did pursue graduate degrees in the US, and that allowed different visa situations. But beyond the US, to job search and such, in COVID, I know that I have personally been even more receptive to networking with folks who reach out virtually. So even before, I loved to share my experiences and share advice wherever I can, because I know that a lot of people helped me get to where I am today. But now, knowing that everybody's virtual, I think it in some ways levels the playing field. You know, you don't have to be in LA and able to come meet me for coffee somewhere. You could just set up a Zoom call or a phone call, and you have kind of the ultimate excuse. And so if you're comfortable being on Zoom or similar, I think that is really helpful. So I've been talking with a lot of people who are interested in my MBA program, for example, or in product management. And I think the more people you talk to who are closer to where you're aiming for, then you can get a lot of great advice that way. This has served me well over the years. When I was looking at grad schools, I talked to many people and just got lots of different perspective. I think as much as a lot of people experience the same thing, everyone's takeaways are different. So networking is, I'm sure, not the earth-shattering new recommendation that you are probably looking for, but I would say that I think a lot of companies are currently being forced to reckon with the fact that COVID is proving that a lot of work can be done remotely. And so I'm sure there are offerings, job offerings, that are going to be more flexible than they were before. And I think that there are companies that are struggling with the impacts of COVID, but there are also companies that are sort of on the flip side, they're benefiting. So like Zoom, for example, has exploded in their customer base, and I think even their stock market performance. A lot of virtual healthcare applications. I know that India, I think, was ahead of the curve compared to the US in terms of telemedicine and things already, but these are just blossoming in this environment. So a lot of markets and a lot of industries are really sort of flourishing in these restrictions. And I think if you are looking for a job, if you are open to considering sort of those industries, it might be a great way to get your foot in the door and get that initial professional experience that could later serve as a conduit to other companies.
Yeah, Charlotte, one quick question from me.
Yeah.
You have actually stayed put in Disney and made your career within the same company, which is maybe unlike many of the Ivy League MBAs do. So you have definitely benefited. So what advice would you give to our students? Build one's career in one company instead of hopping around different companies.
I think that there are benefits to both approaches. There are definitely days all the time where I think, man, am I missing out because I haven't worked for other companies? And so that was part of the appeal of my MBA program, to be surrounded by students who worked for other companies. I could hear their experiences, some of the challenges that they had faced in their prior companies, the way that their teams worked. So I think my MBA classmate network has really helped shore me up in that regard. But I know that times have really changed. I think for a long time, there was a perception that if you hopped around a lot, that you were not perceived as positively because you couldn't be stable or you couldn't get along with people long enough to stick around. But I think that in this era, it is more and more common for people to hop around. So today I am already thinking, even within Disney, I wonder if I've been in my current role long enough that I've gotten most of the benefit of learning new skills that I would hope to get. And maybe I should try a different product manager role on a different team so that I can continue to push myself beyond my comfort zone. So I think changing companies is also super helpful to be able to keep yourself really in tip-top shape. You're actively learning and growing, and you don't sort of stagnate in one place. That said, I obviously did stick with one company. I started with Disney and said I really like it here, and so it all could change. You know, our leadership recently changed after a long tenure of our CEO, and maybe the environment at Disney will feel different in the coming years, and maybe I'll change my mind. I think if the right opportunity were to come up, I would feel comfortable taking it. But on the flip side, I have felt that staying at my current company was worth it for me because I felt really supported at high levels. So Disney's values, we give back to the community. We have volunteer opportunities for employees. We've got environmental causes. We are currently aligning with political messages that I support. For example, the inclusion of like LGBT characters in our TV shows and movies. These are things that were a long time coming. And while Disney is a fairly conservative company in many ways, I feel like we are on the right path. And so I feel comfortable sticking here for the time being, but that could change at any time. So I think as long as you're happy with your leadership and you feel that you're getting what you want out of being with the company, there's certainly nothing wrong with staying there. I think that if you get bored pretty fast and you want to hop around, there's certainly a lot to be said for that as well. I think it would just be prudent to be able to sell the best narrative for that journey for you on your resume and when you're talking with people, to be able to speak to why you move around and what prompted that and what you gained from it.
You have one more question, I think. Someone is, Danny Lewis has asked, any chance that the job opportunities in Disneyland will be extended outside the US in the future?
That's a good question. So already in our Disney parks, we have always had international employees come in. So if you go to the parks, the name tags that you wear say your hometown, and you constantly see name tags of people from other places. In Orlando, we have a theme park called Epcot, where part of the concept of the park is you have a world showcase. And so there's a Canada, there's a Japan, there's a China, and I'm not describing it very well, but basically you go to these pavilions in the park and you learn about this country. And so these pavilions are staffed by people from those countries. A lot of them were part of sort of an international exchange program, and that is currently paused, I think for the first time since the park opened for obvious reasons. But I do think that there are opportunities outside the US, but they might be a little while before they return.
All right, Charlotte, we have reached the end of the allotted time. Once again, on behalf of our university, Amity University, I extend our most hearty thank you to you. And you have enlightened the students very much, especially when you talk to them about the career, how to build a career in the same company, move around, and so on. That was, I'm sure that they will take it as a big advice from somebody as successful as you. Thank you, Charlotte. Good night.
Thank you so much. I'm going to comment my email address in the chat. If everyone can see that, feel free to shoot me emails. I'm happy to answer any questions anytime. But thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you.